Jin's earlier remark surfaced unbidden in Yeonshin's mind, a memory from a conversation about Yeonshin's recent feats. Ma Jin had joked that slaying 5 Bloodsword Masters would earn recognition as a blue warrior, regardless of age. The humor in his tone had been evident, given how rare it was to encounter the Blood Flame sect, let alone defeat its members. Yeonshin's thoughts lingered only briefly before he muttered a single word to himself. Lucky. Then, with an air of cold resolve, he added that only 3 remained. Across from him, his opponent made no response. In the past, such an adversary might have recklessly charged forward, heedless of the warning in Yeonshin's tone. But now, things had shifted. Wariness marked every movement of the Bloodsword Master, whose cautious sidestep betrayed a deep recognition of the danger before him. This opponent was no novice. Unlike the members of the Praying Mantis sect, the Bloodsword Master had sensed the full extent of Yeonshin's power. But Yeonshin had no intention of waiting for an attack. With precision, his foot struck the ground, sending a surge of energy rippling through his body. The second step he took carried intent, a deliberate act that resonated with power. The distance between them vanished as Yeonshin unleashed the Radiant Demon's swift sword technique. The blade carved a sharp trajectory through the air, colliding with his opponent's weapon. The impact echoed as steel clashed with steel, the force of Yeonshin's strike driving his foe backward. Though the enemy had managed to block the attack, the momentum had shifted unmistakably in Yeonshin's favor. This fight needed to end quickly. The Bloodsword Master was formidable, but prolonging the battle in the heart of the Praying Mantis sect would diminish Yeonshin's chances of survival. His piercing sky-blue eyes swept over the swordsman's form, analyzing every subtle movement with a clarity honed by countless battles. As his opponent retreated, Yeonshin sensed the gathering energy in the man's left hand, an unmistakable sign of an impending counterstrike. The opening revealed itself. Instinct guided Yeonshin's body, bypassing thought as he acted. Energy coiled around the desolate sword, channeling the spiral force of the Eternal Blossom Fist into his next strike. The combination of precision and speed compressed the space between them as Yeonshin surged forward. The strike was swift and efficient. Blood sprayed faintly into the air, carried by a gentle breeze. The Bloodsword Master staggered, a choke sound escaping his lips as shock and disbelief etched themselves onto his face. Yeonshin felt the anguish and lingering resentment in the vibrations that ran along his blade. Even as the Bloodsword Master's lips began to move, forming what would have been his final words, Yeonshin did not falter. There was no time for parting sentiments. With a sharp twist of the embedded blade, he ended it. The lifeless body crumpled to the ground, silent and unceremonious, like a flame snuffed out by the wind. He addressed the remaining members of the Praying Mantis sect, his voice low and steady. "Don't flee." The words froze them in place. Though devoid of overt menace, the authority in his tone was undeniable. None dared defy it. As Yeonshin prepared to depart, the weight of the sack strapped to his back was a reminder of his completed task. The villagers gathered around as he prepared to leave. Among them, Mr. Jang, his face streaked with tears, approached to express his gratitude. His voice trembled as he thanked Yeonshin for giving his daughter peace and lifting the burden of his resentment. Yeonshin's voice was barely above a murmur as he replied, a trace of frustration in his tone. Xian should belong to Zhongnan. Mr. Jang stirred at the statement, his grief-stricken face showing a flicker of awareness. He replied hesitantly, mentioning the ongoing conflict between the Zhongnan sect and the Tyrant Sword sect. The words unsettled Yeonshin. Zhongnan at war with the Tyrant Sword sect? The notion was unfamiliar, and it raised unsettling questions. Fragments of memory surfaced. Visions of his family's annihilation and the enigmatic presence of the Tyrant Sword sect leader. The timing of these events, and the Zhongnan sect's involvement, had always felt unnatural. As he processed the implications, his thoughts drifted to his niece, little Haya, and to his second brother, Yongsan. He clung to the hope that they were safe for now. Yeonshin resolved that he needed to go to Zhongnan. The decision aligned with Ma Jin's expected approval. Within the chaotic martial world dominated by the 13 heavens, Desolate Fortress's intervention would inevitably target these supreme forces of evil. The beheading of Tyrant Sword sect masters was not just a reprisal, but a means of securing noteworthy achievements. As he reached the summit, Yeonshin abruptly halted. A question lingered in the air, as he turned toward the rustling bushes nearby. Had there been any sign of stealthy demon? His voice carried the weight of authority, prompting two figures to emerge from the shadows. The first was a swordsman radiating an intense and sharp aura. The second was a young Taoist with an extraordinary presence. They were Cheonju, the sword saint of Manhwa, and Yu Hyun, a direct disciple of Manhwa's sect leader. Approaching with measured steps, they addressed Yeonshin. Cheonju acknowledged that the praying mantis sect was likely not involved. Having witnessed the devastation of an entire sect, his demeanor now carried a distinct reverence. He no longer saw Yeonshin as a promising peer, but as a true martial artist of Desolate Fortress. Yeonshin responded with a calm nod, expressing mild disappointment at the lack of new leads. Cheonju then praised Yeonshin's martial prowess, likening him to the future leader of Radiant Demon Squad or even the Divine Sword Group leader. His admiration seemed genuine, while Yu Hyun, with a thoughtful gaze, interjected that this encounter marked his first defeat. He elaborated that sparring with Yeonshin had been an unparalleled experience. Among his peers, none had posed such a challenge. When Yeonshin inquired about the lack of similarly skilled disciples within Manhwa, Yu Hyun admitted there were none of his age within the sect leader's lineage. His suggestion of forming a friendship was met with a curt, yet not entirely dismissive reply. Yeonshin had no intention of visiting Manhwa, but left the door open for Yu Hyun to seek him out, on the condition that he performed new martial techniques each time. Flustered but encouraged, Yu Hyun brightened at this prospect. Upon arriving at the inn where they had first stayed, their camaraderie reached a temporary pause. Yeonshin ascended to Ma Jin's room, where he was greeted with an astute observation. Chung Myung noted the subtle changes in Yeonshin's energy, while Mirio immediately instructed him to apply some medicine to treat the lingering injuries. Ma Jin's voice pierced the tense air, edged with curiosity and a growing sense of unease. He questioned the progress of the mission. Without a word, Yeonshin loosened the ties and let its contents spill onto the table. Gasps rippled through the gathered, their faces filled with shock. Lying before them was the severed head of the Bloodsword Master, accompanied by the shattered remnants of the Praying Mantis sect's signboard. This was no mere stroke of luck. The incident in Jinping County had not been an isolated fluke. He reached out to Yeonshin, ruffling the boy's hair in a rare gesture of approval. Ma Jin muttered. The mention of involvement from the Blood Flame sect tightened his expression, the scars on his face seeming to deepen as tension gripped him. The implications were grim, and the weight of what had unfolded settled heavily on his shoulders. This proves your worth, he stated plainly, his voice steady and unwavering, acknowledging the boy's accomplishment without unnecessary embellishment. Ma Jin's unease evident in his furrowed brow. Bloodsword masters aren't this common, he murmured, his voice heavy with concern. Standing nearby, Mirio nodded slightly in agreement. This was far from ordinary, and her calm acknowledgement only served to highlight the magnitude of what they faced. Ma Jin's tone shifted, adopting the authority of a seasoned leader. Lightning Genius has accomplished something that cannot be overlooked, he declared. Incidents seem to follow wherever he goes. Yet to handle them so decisively and bring back information of this significance will leave its mark on the martial arts world. The Desolate Fortress will have no choice but to respond to this. Breaking the silence that followed, Yeonshin stepped forward, his voice steady and resolute, belying the tension surrounding him. There is something he needs to report, he announced, his tone firm, without a hint of hesitation. After a pause, he continued, his gaze unwavering and his expression unflinching. He wants to go to Zhongnan's sect.